The cursor blinks in the reason for leaving field, and you realize you've been staring at it for 4 minutes without typing anything that doesn't sound like a breakdown. You delete, "I am tired." You delete, "I can't do this anymore." You type "personal" and you move on because the visa application doesn't have a box for what's actually happening, which is that you are 31 years old, you make $60,000 a year as a UX designer in Denver, and last Tuesday you stood in a King Soopers doing math on a bag of chicken thighs like it was a hostage negotiation. $60,000. On paper, that is more money than 3 of your 4 grandparents ever made in a year. After federal tax, after Colorado's flat 4.4%, after the 7.65 you never see because FICA takes it before the number ever feels real, you clear somewhere in the ballpark of 46. Rent is 21 of that. A 1-bedroom in a building where the gym has been "coming soon" for 2 years. You are not poor. That's the part nobody warns you about. That you can do everything right, the degree, the job, the no credit card debt thing your mother is so proud of, and still feel the floor tilting under you every single month. Your sister Priya calls it the slow no. You're allowed to have things, just never at the same time. Vacation or savings, dentist or new tires, the slow no. And then one night, phone face down on your chest at 1 a.m., you've turned it over. You watch a man in linen pants walk through a 4-bedroom villa in Medellín with a pool that catches the light like a held breath. $800 a month. He says it twice because he doesn't believe it either. $800 a month, full-time housekeeper, the woman who comes Tuesdays and Fridays, fresh mango from the corner for the price of a parking meter. You do the math before you decide to do the math. It just happens. $46,000 a year, dropped into a place where 800 buys what 3,000 buys here. You are not rich in America, but you could be rich somewhere. That's a different sentence than the one you've been living inside, and it lodges in you like a splinter you can already tell you won't be able to leave alone. This is the inciting decision, and here is why you'll defend it to everyone who asks. It is not insane. Geographic arbitrage is real. It's the actual mechanism behind half the early retirement math on the internet. You earn or save in a strong currency, and you spend in a weak one, and the gap is your whole new life. People are doing it right now in Lisbon and Chiang Mai and Mexico City. You're not chasing a fantasy, you're chasing a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet, for once, says yes. You give notice. Your manager says the thing managers say, that the door's always open, and you both know doors don't work like that. You sell the Civic to a kid who counts out the cash on your hood. You keep your job, actually. That's the trick. The new version of the trick. You convince them to let you go remote. $60,000, American, beamed into a country where the median household income is closer to 9. You will be, mathematically, in the top few percent the day you land. You've never been in the top few percent of anything. Priya hugs you at DIA and doesn't let go for a second too long. You're not running away from something, she says into your shoulder. Not quite a question. You say, "Of course not." Remember that you said that. The first thing Medellín does is smell. Diesel and frying plantain and rain on hot concrete, and underneath it something green and enormous, the mountains breathing down into the valley. Your driver doesn't speak English, and your Spanish is 3 Duolingo owls deep, so you ride in a silence that isn't uncomfortable, just full. The city climbs the hillsides in red brick. It is more beautiful than the video, and the video was a trap. Month 1 is euphoria with a fever underneath it. You rent the villa, not the 800 one, you got greedy, you got the 1100 one, El Poblado, the neighborhood every other American has also discovered, with the rooftop and the glass and the pool that does in fact catch the light like a held breath. You stand in it the first night and laugh out loud, alone, a slightly unhinged sound. You text Priya a photo. She sends back 3 exclamation points and then, an hour later, "Is it lonely?" And you put the phone down without answering. You hire Mariella. She comes Tuesdays and Fridays. She's 51. She has a laugh like a drop tray of silverware, and she corrects your Spanish gently, the way you'd correct a child who's trying. You pay her well above the local rate because you read a thread about ethics, and you wanted to be one of the good ones. You pay her, in fact, about $400 a month. Sit with that number. It is more than you've ever paid for help in your life, and it is a rounding error in your old American budget, and it is, to her, transformative, and all 3 of those things are true at once, and the discomfort of holding them is something the linen pants man never mentioned. Here's the concept nobody puts in the videos: purchasing power parity. The same dollar does radically different work depending on where it stands. A Big Mac costs about $6 in the US and roughly half that here, and economists actually track this. The Big Mac Index, a real thing the Economist publishes, a sandwich as a measure of how lopsided the world's currencies are. You are not richer. The dollar is just heavier here. You are arbitraging the accident of where you were born. The line you'll think about at 3 a.m. months later. You didn't earn this advantage. You imported it. By month 3, you have a life that would photograph like a magazine. Mango for breakfast on the rooftop. A man named Esteban who details your rented SUV for what a car wash costs in Denver. Steak dinners, the good cut, with wine, for what an entree alone runs back home. Call it $12, $15 $200 for the whole night. You start a sinking fund just for travel because suddenly you have surplus, actual surplus. The thing America dangled and withdrew for a decade. Cartagena one weekend, the coffee region the next. You feel, for the first time in your adult life, ahead. And there's a Saturday, you have to be honest about this part, where Mariella mentions her son's school fees, almost nothing, a few weeks of your grocery budget, and you feel the math do something ugly in your chest. You could, it would cost you so little, and you don't. You tell yourself it would complicate the relationship, make it weird, blur a professional line. All true. Also, you wanted the steak that month. Both things. You are not the protagonist of a feel-good film, and you knew that already, but now you have proof. The other thread, the one running under all of this, Priya, back in Denver, took the boring road. Same crossroads, opposite turn. When you were doom-scrolling villas, she was maxing her 401k up to the full employer match. Free money, an instant 50 to 100% return that you walked away from the day you went remote and lost yours. She's house hacking a duplex she bought with an FHA loan, 3.5% down, living in one unit, renting the other, her tenant paying most of the mortgage while she builds equity in American real estate that compounds in dollars. Her life is smaller than yours. Her photos are worse. She is, quietly, building something with a foundation, and you can feel the gap between you starting to mean something you can't fully see yet. Month 6 is when the country stops performing for you and starts being real, and the gap in the performance is where the loneliness gets in. You speak restaurant Spanish, transaction Spanish. You do not speak 2 a.m. Spanish. You can order, negotiate, charm a vendor. You cannot say the thing you actually mean to the woman you've been seeing, Daniela, who is sharp and funny in a language you only touch the surface of. There's a dinner where her friends are laughing and you laugh a beat late, every time, always a beat late, and you understand that you will be a beat late here for years, maybe forever, that fluency isn't a course you finish, but a country you may never get citizenship in, and the dating itself has a wire running through it you can't ground. You're a foreigner with a foreign salary, in a place where that salary is a superpower. You never quite know, is it you, or is it the exit you represent? You hate that the question exists. You hate more that it's not paranoid. Daniela never asks for a thing, which somehow makes it worse, because now the suspicion is entirely yours, a thing you carry into the relationship and set down on the table between you every night. You meet other expats. There's a whole ecosystem of them, and you start to clock the types, the genuine ones building real lives, and the other kind, the man at the rooftop bar, 50-something, on his second mojito at 4 in the afternoon, who tells you he came for a year, and that was 6 years ago, and his American voice has gone soft and unmoored, and he keeps saying, "You can really live here, man," and you realize with a small cold drop that he is not describing a paradise. He is describing an anesthetic. You order water. You go home early. You don't fully know why. Then you get sick. Really sick. A kidney stone. The pain that makes you understand why people fear pain. And here the country surprises you in the other direction. The clinic is clean, fast, staffed by a doctor who trained in Houston. The CT scan, the meds, the whole episode costs you under $200 out of pocket. No insurance, no fight, no surprise bill arriving 6 weeks later like a debt collector in an envelope. In America, that same night runs into the thousands, even with coverage. Medical bills are the thing behind a huge share of U.S. bankruptcies. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has documented medical debt sitting on the credit reports of tens of millions of people. You lie in the recovery bed doing this math, and you start, embarrassingly, to cry. And it's not the pain. It's that you didn't have to be afraid of the money. You'd forgotten that was even an option. You'd carried that particular fear so long you'd stopped feeling it, like a sound you only notice when it stops. That's the 7-minute mark of your old life ending and a new question beginning. Because here's what the kidney stone taught you that the villa never could. Some of what you fled wasn't your failure. It was the system. You weren't bad at America. America was expensive at you. And that realization splits 2 ways at once. Relief and a grief you didn't expect. Because if it wasn't your fault, then leaving didn't fix a flaw in you. It just relocated you away from the blast radius. The flaw, if there is one, came on the plane. Year 1, Thanksgiving. You get the family on a video call and the lag turns everyone into a stutter. Your mother holds the phone too close, all forehead. Priya's there with her tenant-funded equity and her boring, growing 401k. And someone asks how you're doing and you say, amazing. You say, you wouldn't believe my life. And you hold up the rooftop, the pool, the view, and they make the sounds people make. And then the call ends and the apartment is very quiet and the pool is just a rectangle of water nobody else will ever swim in. And you sit on the edge of the bed in a 4-bedroom villa where you have never once needed the other 3 bedrooms. Here's what money can't fix, and it's smaller than you'd think. It's not the big stuff. It's that your dad had a fall in November. Minor, he's fine, and you found out 4 days later. It's that you are not in the room. You bought a life that runs on a satellite delay, and you are watching everyone you love through glass. In a slightly worse resolution, always a beat behind, the same beat you're behind at Daniela's dinners. You optimized for cost of living, and you forgot to price the cost of leaving. The relational cost has a specific shape, and it arrives the way these things always do, sideways and small. Your nephew, Priya's son, 4 years old when you left, turned 6, and on the video call he is polite to you. Polite. The warmth a kid has for a relative they actually know, that easy climbing into your lap thing, it's just not there, because to him you are a face on a phone who sends gifts. You have become, to the one person whose whole life is still being decided, an account rather than an uncle, and there is no flight you can book that buys back the version of him that would have known you. Year 2, you stop recognizing the question you came to answer. You'd asked, "Can I afford to live well?" And the country said yes, emphatically, generously. But somewhere in the second year, a different question moves in and won't leave. Who are you when the struggle that defined you is gone? You spent your whole 20s being the person grinding against a system, and your identity, it turns out, was load-bearing on that grind. Take away the resistance and you don't feel free. You feel weightless, unanchored. You catch yourself manufacturing small problems just to have something to push against. You did the math on everything except this. There's no exchange rate for the part of you that was made of friction. Daniela asks you one night, in slow Spanish so you'll catch all of it, whether you're staying, not pushing, just asking, and you hear yourself say, "I don't know," in a language you barely speak, and it's the most honest sentence you've produced in 2 years, and she nods like she already knew, because of course she did. She's been dating a man with one foot on a plane the entire time. The expat at the bar, the anesthetic man, you see him again. Except now when he says, "You can really live here," you don't hear a warning anymore. You hear a guy who found a place where his money was loud enough to drown out a quieter question, and you understand you are maybe 3 mojitos and 4 years from being him, and the only thing between you and that chair is whether you can answer the question instead of relocating it. So you sit with the verdict, and the verdict refuses to be clean. Going back means surrendering the villa, the pool, the steak dinners, the $200 kidney stone, the surplus, the genuine and undeniable fact that you live better here than you ever could there. Staying means the satellite delay becomes permanent, means the nephew never climbs into your lap, means betting that a life of comfort can eventually fill the space where the friction used to be. Both are real losses. Anyone who tells you the geo-arbitrage move is obviously brilliant or obviously hollow has never actually had to choose, has never sat on the edge of a pool they paid almost nothing for and felt almost everything. You open the laptop, same field, different application, flights this time, not visas. The cursor blinks in the destination box. You start to type the airport code for Denver, and you stop at the second letter, your finger over the key, and you genuinely do not know if you are going home or just going to visit the place that used to be home. And you sit there long enough that the screen dims itself, and you let it. And in the dark, you ask the only question that was ever actually the question, the one no exchange rate ever touched. What were you really trying to get away from? And did you, anywhere on that whole flight, actually leave it behind?